Since the release of Super Mario Maker, clever engineers, overconfident visionaries, and adventurous entrepreneurs have all been unified by a simple vision. A vision as hard to achieve as it is theoretically simple. The simple idea of coming up with an encryption mechanism in Super Mario Maker that cannot be beaten. To upload a combination lock or password level that can only be beaten by the level's creator. The holy grail of Mario Maker. To upload a truly unbeatable level without actually having to be good at the game. Over the years, countless people worked towards this simple vision. People studied the throwing patterns of Hammer Bros. They cartographed the exact movement of thousands of clown cars. They even endured difficult mathematical calculations. Over the years, dozens of attempts to create cryptographically impossible levels were uploaded to Super Mario Maker servers. And yet they all met the same fate. Every single one of them saw their masterfully engineered combination lock completely break down as soon as Mario Maker's relentless community got their hands onto it. Even Lycric, the creator of the most secure combination lock that has ever been conceived in the entire history of Super Mario Maker, had to suffer through a forceful unlocking of their stage. In this video, we are going to retell these tales. We're going to take a look at how passcode stages in Super Mario Maker have historically evolved, how they became cleverer and cleverer with every iteration, and how the community nonetheless found a way to unlock all of them over and over again. We'll dive deep into the theory of Mario Maker encryption, crack countless historic combination locks once again, and if we're not careful, we might accidentally learn something about real-world cybersecurity as well. So gentle ladies, gentlemen, and gentle people in general, are you ready? Then let's do this. Alrighty right. So to understand how the community managed to crack even the most complicated Super Mario Maker encryption algorithm that the world has seen so far, we do not have to start with the most sophisticated encrypted stage, but we have to turn back the clock and start at the very beginning of Mario Maker encryption. So let's travel back in time together and let's start at the very beginning of Mario Maker's cybersecurity. The year is 1851. It's the 22nd of July. The Great Exhibition is currently taking place in London, a grand exhibition of culture and industry. We're in a small room in Westminster. In front of us are a couple of curious men. Behind us is a rather unusual American named Alfred Charles Hobbs, and even behind him there is a gigantic vault. A vault that is locked tightly with a so-called detector lock. And this very lock was at the center of the scandal that was about to take place. You see, this detector lock was a widely popular lock in Victorian England. It was a clever mechanism that was able to detect attempts to open it by any other means than inserting the fitting key. Which brings us back to the locksmith, Alfred Charles Hobbs, and the scandal that was about to take place. You see, to the astonishment of the people in front of him, Hobbs all of a sudden pulled out a few small tools from his pocket. We would never learn what tools he had exactly used. The local press decided it would be safer for society if they kept the nature of the tools used a secret. A very reasonable stance, given the troubling nature of what was about to unfold. So Alfred Charles Hobbs took his tools, and within less than half an hour, the deed was done. Alfred Charles Hobbs had just picked the vault behind him. But he did not only pick the lock. He did it publicly, instructing everyone who was listening on how any lock of this popular type could be picked. Why on earth would he do something like that? He just gave a public demonstration on how to commit burglary. This American had just come to England to teach local criminals on how to more effectively rob lawful Englishmen. The scandal was perfect. So, why are we waffling about a locksmith giving public burglary instruction in the middle of the 19th century in a video about the history of encryption in Super Mario Maker, one might ask? Well, because this little anecdote here actually perfectly captures a couple of core aspects of security, be it physical security or be it digital encryption, which brings us to Super Mario Maker. You see, at its core, an encrypted Super Mario Maker stage is nothing more than a locked vault. In Victorian England, people were locking away things like money, jewels or colonial plunder. In Super Mario Maker, the thing that we want to lock away is Mario's beloved flagpole. It is reaching the end of the level that we try to safely store in such a way that only the level's creator is able to reach it. To prevent anyone from reaching this goal, we build a lock around it, and this lock can only be opened with a key. In our Victorian example, the key and the lock are physical objects, but as it turns out, they don't necessarily have to be. Instead of a physical key, we could also use a password that we have to name or a number that we have to enter. We could even use a specific series of inputs on a controller. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that we come up with some form of a lock that can only be opened with the corresponding key, which already brings us to the first historic design of Super Mario Maker locks and how they were defeated. So this here is one of the most primitive Super Mario Maker locks imaginable. Here we just stacked a bunch of unfortunate Goombas on top of each other. At the top there's a highly motivated Koopa that is walking back and forth while being blocked by the munchers that live atop the Goombas. That's all there is to it. If Mario wants to reach his beloved flagpole ever again, then he has to murder the correct amount of Goombas so that the Koopa on top is able to reach the P-switch on the other side, which opens up the exit and allows Mario to escape. We constructed this lock in such a way that we can see what is going on here. But we could easily have the Koopa be outside of the player's vision, which would hide all information from the player, meaning that the level is only beatable if we know the exact amount of Goombas that we have to murder. The correct amount of Goomba homicides is our key here. So why is a lock like this not secure? Well, because of a very simple yet very critical design flaw. You see, we might be able to come up with a very secure password using a mechanism like this, but no matter how secure the password in such a level, the lock itself, however, is not. The lock is actually unbelievably insecure, because the key that is required to open it is engraved into the lock itself. If someone were to take a look at the mechanism of the lock, they could immediately deduce the key required to unlock it. Such a level is only secure if no one is ever able to see the stage. Unfortunately, however, people are very much able to view each and every stage. There are level viewing tools out there that make it possible to inspect each and every stage that was ever uploaded to Mario Maker servers. Locks like this one are a ton of fun to theory craft, but they will never be truly secure, because people will always be able to deduce the key just by taking a look at the system. And this is where things become really interesting. You see, just a couple of weeks ago, a small YouTube creator called H&L gave a mathematically impossible level a shot and iterated on this very design. His idea was as simple as it was clever. The core problem that all the previous locks share is a pretty obvious one. The code is just immediately obvious by looking at the level. But what if we were to come up with a way to obscure this information? What if we figured out a way to make it impossible to deduce the code just by looking at our system? After all, these designs are incredibly good at generating long, unpredictable keys. The only problem that they have is that it is not possible to obscure the key from someone looking at the lock. And thus H&L messed around with this idea and actually managed to find a really smart solution to this problem. Here's the thing, the Mario Maker level viewers actually have a weakness, a critical flaw that H&L mercilessly exploited. While the popular level viewers are able to show us which specific item a creator hid in a block, they do not display the information of whether this very item was modified. To the level viewer, a wiggler, a big wiggler, and a wiggler with wings are all the same wiggler. So modified items are displayed the same way as unmodified items in a viewer, even though they behave vastly different in-game. This little quirk in the level viewer is at the heart of H&L's attempt to fix the weakness previous locks have had. Using this little quirk, H&L actually managed to build a level that has 2 to the power of 61 possible input combinations, which is a pretty strong key strength. It's honestly a really cool design. There's a link to the video in the description if you want to check it out. It's fun. So is this it? Did H&L actually manage to upload a perfectly secure lock to Super Mario Maker by finding a smart way to obscure how the key is encrypted into the lock? Well, as the title of the video probably already gave away, nope-si-dope. It only took a couple of days until the community had cracked the code and finished the level. Oh dear, what had happened here? Well, to understand why this lock was pickable, we once again have to return to the 19th century, because I haven't yet told you the entire story about the scandalous lockpicking that publicly took place in 1851. You see, this very incident, The incident of the Victorian lock being publicly picked is actually one of the first public displays of one of the most critical principles in modern cybersecurity. A very simple principle that is so fundamental that the entire internet is built upon it. The principle that there will never be security through obscurity. You see, when the press learned about the fact that Hobbes publicly taught everyone who wanted to listen how to pick one of England's most common locks, they were furious. How could the locksmith do something so irresponsible? Isn't he aware that he's making everyone in London less safe by teaching thieves how to open locks? How could this filthy American do something so bloody awful? And of course, as is tradition, the Victorian press totally missed the point of Hobbes' demonstration, because as a matter of fact, Hobbes was not making England less safe by teaching everyone how to pick a lock. He was doing the opposite. As a matter of fact, criminals back in the day were already very much aware of the weaknesses of the lock. It was just the lock's owners who did not know that their very secure locks were actually breakable. Making the public aware of a critical security flaw obviously does not make everyone less safe. It does the opposite. It makes everyone safer. The idea to hide how a lock can be picked does not make a lock safer, because there is no true security through obscurity. If a system tries to be safe by obscuring how it can be picked, then the system will never be truly safe. And this is the very principle that ended up being the undoing of H&L stage, which already brings us to Kerckhoffs's law. In 1883, Dutch cryptographer Kerckhoff stated a principle that to this day holds true. Namely, that a crypto system is only secure if every part of the system is public knowledge, but the key required to open it. The idea is to always assume that the enemy, in our case Mario, knows the system. To assume that every bit of the system is known by whatever bad actor is trying to open it. Every part of the system but the key. This is the reason why nowadays every serious encryption algorithm is public knowledge, and why proprietary encryption algorithms are generally considered to be a terrible idea. Which brings us back to H&L stage. You see, what he did with his lock was to find a really smart way to obscure how the system works, but the information on how to open the system was still inherently woven into the lock itself. Which is exactly how people were able to crack the code. Nowadays we just have access to modded copies of Mario Maker, allowing us to view pretty much every information in every stage, completely independent of the level viewer. Someone just took a look at the level using modding tools, which immediately revealed the key. Hooray! So this is how all traditional encryption attempts in Mario Maker have been decoded so far. The information on the nature of the key was always in some form stored in the locking mechanism, and trying to obscure this information on the lock will never provide real security because of Kerckhoffs's law. But this is not the end of the history of Mario Maker encryption yet, because there is a completely different type of lock as well. A different type of lock that actually managed to provide at least a little bit of security. So we have to talk about the RNG ladder once again. You see, invisible to the player's eye, there is a hidden RNG constant running in the background of each Mario Maker level. We sadly can't go into very much detail on how exactly this hidden RNG constant operates because we just did this and it took us over half an hour, but let's very quickly go over the basics so that everyone is able to understand the invisible forces that we are about to manipulate. So let me share the good news with all of you. The random number generation in Super Mario Maker is deterministic and follows a predictable pattern. If we always input the exact same inputs in a level, then any given random event in a level will always play out exactly the same. We can visualize this using a ladder. We always start at the bottom, and most of the actions that we take during a level move us upwards on this ladder. Any given RNG outcome in the game is dependent on where we are on this ladder. So if we input a very specific series of inputs, then we can make sure that we end up on a very specific step on the ladder. This allows us to predict the outcome of future RNG events in Mario Maker. And this very idea, the idea that it is possible to predict random events in the future, can actually be used to build cryptographical systems. Here's the thing, it is our own inputs that change our position on the RNG ladder, and alongside it, the outcome of future random events in the game. Our inputs, however, are actually an input. Mind-blowing, I know. Our inputs are a very specific series of inputs that no one but ourselves knows. Our inputs on the controller are the perfect basis to generate a password. But it gets even better. You see, so far, our encrypted levels had to use mechanical systems to test whether our key was correct. This mechanical reading, however, also forced us to permanently encode our key into our lock. If we were to use player inputs as the key and specific random events as the lock, however, then we do not have to encrypt our key into our lock. Instead, we can just use tons of coin flip machines in a row. Coin flip machines all look the same to someone trying to crack our level. However, each one of them behaves differently depending on our position on the RNG ladder. Using all of these facts together, it should theoretically be possible to build a system in which tons of coin flip machines only allow us to complete the level if we previously entered a perfect sequence of inputs. It's the perfect plan for the perfect lock, something that certainly no one could ever decipher. Which already brings us to It Rhymes with Toad. It Rhymes with Toad is a legendary Super Mario Maker 2 stage uploaded by Canadian Mario Maker creator Lycric. It Rhymes with Toad is probably the most secure lock that has been conceived in Mario Maker so far. A stage built around the very idea that we just theory crafted. At the heart of It Rhymes with Toad is this innocently looking room. At first glance, this room might not look like much, but holy fuzzy, this room turned out to be a revolution in Mario Maker cryptography. Can you sense the incredible power that this room radiates? It's eerie, I know. Here's what's going on. At the top there's a buzzy beetle periodically bouncing into an on-off switch, which changes the state of a bunch of blocks on the ground. That's all there is. Why is this bouncing buzzy beetle such a revolution in cryptography, I hear you ask? Well, the insanely clever thing that is going on here isn't a contraption. It is the knowledge on how to use it. You see, every frame that Mario walks, he moves up a certain amount of steps on the RNG ladder. If Mario happens to turn around, however, he also moves on the RNG ladder. The same is true if he ducks or jumps. And this contraption here is set up to easily allow us to get to a specific ladder step using our inputs. You see, if we go, say, right, left, then we add a certain amount of RNG to our total each time we go right, and a slightly different amount once we go left. Add to this that we sometimes can also choose to jump or to duck, and that anyone encountering this stage has no way of knowing if our input code is 10 inputs or 2000 long, and we get an insanely secure lock that can't be read just by looking at the level data. All that we now have to add to this level are coin flip machines that only allow us to leave if we previously entered a key that only we know. Which is of course exactly what It Rhymes with Toad ended up doing. Once we walk through a door, we are all of a sudden chased by an angry thwomp that forces us to immediately run to the right. Since the thwomp forces us to permanently run to the right, every player will end up climbing the same amount of RNG ladder steps while running. While Mario is running for his life, there are a total of 29 clown car randomizers above him. These clown cars either run to the right or to the left, depending on our position on the RNG ladder. One of the directions has the clown car drop a deadly item directly onto poor Mario's head, while the other direction is safe. The only way to get all clown cars to flee into a safe direction is if we before made it to a very specific step on the RNG ladder. Otherwise, we die here. Theoretically, we could also just get lucky, but the chance for all 29 clown cars to randomly flee into the correct direction is 1 in over 500 million, which is rather unlikely. And this is the whole trick. This is how It Rhymes with Toad revolutionized academic Mario Maker encryption, by using a specific step on the RNG ladder as key and specific random events as the lock. So is this finally it? Did this level achieve what no one before managed to do? Was this stage finally a perfect encryption algorithm that cannot be beaten? Well, at least theoretically, it is not, which leaves us with a question. What theoretical weakness does a beautiful lock like this one still have? How in all of Bowser's castles would it ever be possible to pick something like this? The answer? Well, actually, you already know the answer, because we just waffled about it before. The huge weakness that It Rhymes with Toad has is the very same problem that every failed encryption system of the past had, be it in Agent L's attempt at Mario Maker cryptography, or be it the literal Nazis during World War II, who used a machine called Enigma to encrypt their messages, which was also cracked. It always boils down to the same problem: The problem that there is no security through obscurity. You see, it rhymes with Toad is an unbelievably clever level. It is a level that requires an insane amount of Mario Maker knowledge to even understand what is going on here, and it generates a fitting key to its lock in a stunningly clever way. But at its core, the information on a specific key is still embedded in the lock. The information about what the password is still stored in a publicly visible part of the stage. It is tremendously obscured, but it is still there. Here's the thing, the only way to beat the level is by arriving at a very specific step on the RNG ladder. The key to this level is how many steps we took before, and this information is embedded in the mechanism. Where is this information hiding, I hear you ask? Well, in the bellies of the clown cars, of course. You see, each one of those clown cars takes a number off of the RNG ladder to decide whether it should flee to the right or to the left, and then sends us one step higher on the ladder. But we can actually take a look at the ladder. After all, the RNG ladder is deterministic. All steps on it are always the same. So to beat this level, we need to find a very specific series of ouched clown car behaviors. Something like the specific series of left, left, right, right, and so on for 29 steps in a row. If we were to spot this exact sequence on the RNG ladder, then we would actually know the very ladder step that we need to be on to beat the level. The RNG ladder step is the key after all. Once we know the correct ladder step, we can relatively easily figure out what inputs we have to perform to reach the same step and beat the stage like that. That's how this level can theoretically be reverse engineered, just by looking at which directions the clown cars would have to move to for us not to get crushed. Theoretically, we have all the knowledge required to calculate this. Theoretically, it is possible to clear the stage. Theoretically, there is just one final problem, one last layer of security. Doing this is insanely tedious. Like, you can't even imagine. You'd have to do insanely tedious calculations of the exact RNG ladder position that causes each clown car to behave correctly. All of this has to be looked at in relation to Mario's position, since he permanently adds randomness because he's running, and then you'd have to think about the correct spawn order of all the objects on screen so that you don't mess up the entire calculation, and all of that is before talking about other annoyances, like that the sneveling clown cars always mess up everything when they hit a spike, because their dumb I am in pain animation uses RNG calls as well. Who in their right mind would ever go through the trouble of decoding all of this? Well, let me introduce you to Ceave, Gatia, Happy Lappy, MineCXT, Vector, and Ceamator, who alongside others recognized the scientific importance of the task in front of us and decided not to rest until the deed was done. Here's an RNG ladder flowchart that the community created to understand exactly how we're moving along the ladder here. Ceamator actually went through the trouble of programming an algorithm to help them reverse engineer the required RNG ladder step for the clown cars to behave favorably and how to reach it. What we're currently looking at is Ceamator publicly entering the result of their investigation on YouTube. Here is what happens once he walks through the door. Yep, they actually did it. They managed to clear the level, demonstrating to us that no matter how crazy you are, the Mario Maker community is crazier, while once again proving good old Kirchhoff right. There is no security through obscurity. Hooray! So here we have it, a historical treatise on the evolution of cryptography in Super Mario Maker, starting all the way back in 1851. Before we wrap this up, just two more things. So first, as always, a gigantic thank you to all my wonderful patrons whose names are currently flapping by. These wonderful people not only get regular access to small additional videos and scripts, but their generous support is also the coal heating the furnace that is powering historical research like this one. A huge thank you to them for that. Second, does this mean that perfect encryption in Super Mario Maker is actually impossible? Does this mean that there will never be a way to upload a truly mathematically impossible level to Mario Maker? Well, maybe. The current sentiment in the community is that every encrypted algorithm in Mario Maker can be pocketed eventually, but I personally beg to differ. I've been working on a little attempt on Mario Maker cryptography myself, which will be the next video we're going to take a look at. Actually, this video and even the previous one were actually all part of that one video about a new approach to Mario Maker encryption direction, but things were escalating a bit in scale, and thus this is the second part of my single video series on Mario Maker cryptography. You can expect part 3 of 1 in a couple of weeks. Hooray! So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up and maybe feel especially secretive today and want to hit the subscribe button as well. Finally, if you truly love this video and want to support content like this, then there's also the option to support the channel via Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, lots of hugs.